Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland, one of the co-founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. We are here to finish off Daredevil Born Again, which had 9 episodes, not 8, to my surprise. And we had a little break because of going to Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo. We'll have a special episode on our adventures there. But for now, let's finish off Daredevil. With me for this adventure is Gabby Martin and retired Judge Matthew Sherino. Gabby, how are you this evening?
Doing good, doing good. I don't know if I was the biggest fan of the season finale. I liked the overall season, but I did have some gripes with how they ended it. But I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are.
I have feelings too. Your Honor, your thoughts.
Yeah, I was hoping for a bit of a stronger conclusion, but the season was good, and I see it for what it was is kind of a setup for the next season, which is only good if there is one. And so as long as there is a next season, I will accept this one as doing a pretty good job of setting it up and bringing it to Disney and kind of setting the tone for the show from where it left Netflix.
I thought it was an excellent season. I also had some issues with the ending. I don't mind cliffhangers. I'm completely fine with a cliffhanger ending because that's life. Life doesn't always have a nice, fun resolution after an adventure. You can go, well, now we have a new fight. That part doesn't bother me. What bothered me was the Punisher smarter than to walk in a trap. He would have had
Yeah.
anti-tank weapons. He would have leveled the building and killed all of them. And that would have been it. He would not walk in with an axe and a handgun to fight people with extreme prejudice. It would have been a brutal slaughter from short of a drone strike.
Yeah,
So
he was always a very good planner and executioner of those plans, and that was very simplistic for Frank Castle.
yeah, I'm just gonna walk in. It's like, what are you trying to discover, dude? Like, those are the bad guys. Like, what's with that? And
Yeah, and there didn't even seem to be like I was waiting for that kind of, as we talked about, that kind of big, almost comeuppance moment, right? Where he kind of got to confront these quote unquote fanboys head on, right? And I think for me, John Bernthal is such a phenomenal actor and can deliver lines really incredibly. Like his first entrance, I think it's episode 3, right, in the season that, he has the confrontation with Matt, and that was really strong. And I was hoping for an equally strong kind of confrontation with these police officers. And it just, I think the intercutting with Kingpin doesn't allow give it its moment to shine. And it's really kind of truncated. And I didn't really understand the reference to Captain America as the kind of like person they should be idling. But it was just odd and it didn't give it that kind of weight that I think it was setting up to have.
yeah, it was a little lackluster because he would have killed all of them. And you have to work really hard for me to root for the Punisher, and they succeeded. So that was something. But it was just he's smarter than this. Now I remember reading, Punisher War Journal when I was young, where everything was a calculated attack, and they just dropped the ball on that. So that was the part that really took me out of it. Because he's smarter than this. Like Matt realizing that we're gonna have to step back and come up with a new plan, fine. But I have a hunch that if New York went dark and there was rioting and problems, New York State would not ignore that situation, nor the federal government. We've seen what happens when New York is under attack.
I've done 2 blackouts in New York,
Oh God.
so I'm well experienced with New York in the dark.
Yeah, the rest of us noticed. Help was there. The governor wouldn't be like,
One did not go very well, and they learned their lessons, and then the second one was handled a lot differently. But there was a lot of rioting during the late 70s with the blackout, the year the Yankees won the World Series, so 78, I guess, the summer of, and it was summer of Son of Sam.
oh, good Lord.
It was a several day blackout, and there was a lot of damage done to certain parts of New York City. There was a change in leadership for the second blackout, and it was handled a lot more closer to martial law, and was less rioting, or the rioting ended much sooner.
Yeah. I'm sorry you went through two of those. Uh, yeah, I don't remember in the 1989 earthquake any rioting that took place in the Bay Area. No, that was right at the beginning of the 89 World Series. And with the A's versus the Giants, it was our Battle of the Bay. So again, a lot of people were getting ready to watch the ball game. There was chaos from, bridge collapses and other horrible things that took place. But I don't remember any rioting compared to, say, Hurricane Katrina, like, again, natural disaster, blackout, and things get ugly. But how people handle that, I mean, I look at history from the 1906 earthquake, and martial law was declared, and San Francisco in 1906 did not
Mhm.
mess around. Anywho, on to the rest of the episode with those historical real life comparisons. So we start with this 1 year flashback with Bullseye in prison and Vanessa visiting him. And there's a reference to Daredevil season 3 with the FBI agent Ray Nadeem. For those who don't recall, Nadeem was blackmailed by Wilson Fisk. Nadeem had testified before a grand jury about the Kingpin blackmailing of FBI agents into protecting the crime lord, because Kingpin was staying at a hotel for his incarceration. And then it turns out the grand jury is also compromised. Nadine returned home, waited to be executed by Fisk and his operatives. And before being shot by Bullseye, Nadine recorded a confession and said it was his dying declaration. And I will highlight, that's not how dying declarations work. A dying declaration is you've been shot, you had a major medical incident, you have impending death, and you say, aliens are real. I worked on UFOs at Area 51, and then the person expires because they're bleeding out. It's that kind of thing, not I have my iPhone and I'm recording what could be a TikTok video, hoping that gets into evidence. Sure, it might be a party admission at that point because it's really bad for FBI agents to say, yes, we protected the crime lord from further prosecution and turned into his personal hit squad. We don't like that as a society. But again, it's not how dying declarations work. That trauma brought back memories of season 3. And it's just like, that's not how the law works. But the fact that they reference that as the acquittal, I found fascinating. Your Honor, what were your thoughts to this acquittal and then this document getting signed for Bullseye to get out of prison to be Vanessa's henchman?
Yeah, I would have loved to have like seen a little bit more of that document. You kind of caught little glimpses. They caught the caption, the signature. I mean, there's really no kind of civil conditional release that two people could sign that would then get someone else out of jail. The only people that can release someone out of jail is the government. So I best I can guess, it was some kind of conditional release where he was going to be released to some kind of work program or program run by the Kingpin. Um, so, yeah, but he wouldn't be a necessary signatory to that. So I couldn't figure out what in real life that would actually be. But it worked as a mechanism to release Bullseye so that he can continue to kind of do uh, some work for Kingpin.
It was just weird. I mean, Gabby, did you have any reactions to this?
Yeah, my biggest issue was that he's clearly medicated, and I'm pretty sure Vanessa leans over and kind of, does a little helping assistance there with the signature. And obviously, as the judge said, we can't really identify what this is, and obviously the government, he wouldn't really sign anything as part of his release. But even if this were some document that he's releasing, that he's attesting to in some way, um, we kind of question whether he had the capacity to do so, because it looks like he's on pretty strong medication. He can't really form sentences. He's having a kind of hard time. Kind of part of it seems to be emotional, but also part of it seems to be him being very drugged up. And then obviously Vanessa assisting, we think of terms of wills and trusts, right? You can't kind of have somebody sign, assist your very wealthy loved one in signing a will that, lends everything to you, or leaves everything to you. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of also capacity issues if this was an actual legal document that he'd have to sign.
It also just doesn't make sense because it's one thing if this is like some power of attorney for getting legal representation to look at his case, encouraging him for we got this law firm that's going to help you, but we need you to sign so they can help you. Like that I could get, but this was just weird. Almost as weird as a dying declaration where you're not dying. Um, so call me old fashioned. Whew. All right, which then brings us to Matt taking the shot aimed at Kingpin. This turned out radically differently than I expected. Because I expected Kingpin to have some very conflicted feelings out of loyalty. It's like, wow, this guy took a bullet for me. And instead, I should have him killed. Let's finish this off once and for all. That was not the result I was expecting. And I see shaking heads. Gabby, you're very forceful here. Your reaction?
I was just so confused, and I was honestly a little annoyed because we talked about it last episode, is it kind of sets up the perfect framework, right, for this very public scene. Nobody knows, except for the few people, that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, right? And it's not like he's publicly revealed his identity like an Iron Man or Spider-Man or whoever. And so it sets up this very big thing for him to put Fisk in. He saved his wife, he saved Fisk's life, right? It kind of almost forces his hand in a way to do something in return, right? Kind of political. And that sometimes happens, right? Where you're like, oh, I don't really like this guy, but now I have to kind of, pay it back publicly because he did this big thing, right? And for me, I thought they were going to go with, as we talked about, the Matt as DA route, right? And have him name Matt as DA to kind of keep him closer. And he just barrels past that and just says, nope, just the dead vigilante is, or whatever he says. And it's
A
just like,
dead hero is better than a live vigilante. That was a great line.
yeah,
Yeah, what troubled me about it sends the message Matt should not have taken the bullet for the Kingpin. Society would have been better off if he had not been the hero. And that's a really sad reaction that their problems would New York would not have had a body count with police officers just executing people in the street overnight if Kingpin had been shot.
And Frank Castle really makes a point of that when talking to Matt and saying, like, how could you take a bullet for this guy? I mean, Frank really kind of just couldn't wrap his brain around that, rightfully so, with Kingpin's reaction, or his thank you for that activity.
Yeah, and that's it's just not a good reaction because it's yeah, well, they would have been better off if the Kingpin had died. Like literally,
Yeah.
society would have been better.
Yeah, and it really does seem to like, and this is why I had, kind of a challenge with it, is it almost seemed as if, because obviously there were rewrites with the show, right? They kind of scrapped a lot of stuff. And I always got the impression that the first episode was them reusing a lot of material that they had already filmed and then kind of cutting to whatever storyline they had wanted to kind of implement. But this seemed to almost return to that kind of odd narrative structure that the first episode had and kind of undercut all the work that was done over the season, with Matt kind of pulling away from his work as a defense attorney, right, which would lead you to believe he's moving to the prosecution side. So yeah, it was very odd choice.
Yeah, I mean, I did not read all of them. I only remember the articles about them of Daredevil effectively running Hell's Kitchen and like a little army of Daredevils running around. Are we going that way instead? It's just weird. It was an unexpected turn that leaves a bad taste in my mouth because you cannot have events of such magnitude and Kate Bishop sit it out, Miss Marvel sit it out, Spider-Man sit it out. You have all these heroes based in New York, and Clint Barton probably suiting up and driving down from upstate to take action. So it's just a very weird situation because you have all these vigilantes and heroes who would not stand for this. So, let alone the rest of society. That said, we then pivot to what the. Okay, so bad move if you're waking up from any procedure and you say the old girlfriend's name to the current girlfriend, you already had to save from a vigilante, an assassination attempt. Bad move. Glad you have someone there to say it's the drugs talking, but still, bad move. Uh, but let's get what Kingpin's up to with Red Hook and the quest that our heroes eventually go on for figuring out why Red Hook is important. So we got some notes here. Gabby, can you talk to us about moving funds through Red Hook?
Yeah, so we finally get official confirmation that he is misappropriating city resources, right? Or if he hasn't started yet, he's certainly indicating that that's his intention to do that, right? Because he tells Vanessa that she had moved millions through Red Hook, and now he can move billions, right? So there's that financial piece. And he also says that that's really why he ran for mayor. If that's maybe something that changed, maybe. But regardless, he is misappropriating city resources, right? So this is a violation at minimum of the conflict of interest policy that we talked about in one of the earlier episodes, right? That says that public servants in New York and generally elsewhere, but particularly in New York, under 2604B3, cannot use their position to obtain any financial gain, contract, license, or privilege. And they can't use it for any private financial interest as well. And they can't use confidential information that they know as elected officials or other public servants to for financial gain. So then at worst, right, that's at minimum violating kind of his oath of office, right? And his kind of conflicts of interest. But you could make the argument, and I think it's pretty clear from what he's admitting here, that there is a conspiracy to commit fraud, right? That is, I think, what he is engaging Vanessa in, that they're going to do with Red Hook. We've seen this with other elected officials defrauding. There's under 18 U.S. Code 371. There's a count to conspiracy to commit offense or to defraud the United States, which does apply to states as well, as we saw with Bridgegate. And then, of course, wire fraud, 18 USC 1340, 1343. So there is a scheme to defraud, right? They're using this for financial gain. They have intent, and obviously they didn't have wire fraud there, right? Because they're sitting in a room together. But the minute they call or text, as these individuals often do, say Buck or anybody else, bang, you got the communicating via wire communications. So I do think they are on the hook for a bunch of other things, but certainly committing fraud using these city resources.
Which brings us to the blackout, but there are a couple. The blackout is a means to the end to push the city over the edge, to build upon a crisis that was just an assassination attempt to how do we exploit the assassination attempt. Think, well, again, they're not good comparisons, but think how LBJ was walking around with a copy of the Tonkin Gulf Resolution before the Tonkin Gulf incident happened, like ready for that authorization to use force in Vietnam, just waiting for the moment when that would give them reason to get that passed. And Fisk wants to put a squeeze on the city council for an ordinance to go into effect, and is wanting to send people home who aren't on board. And we have this issue of this blackout about to create chaos. So, Your Honor, are you the voice in the dark to explain the blackout scenario?
Yeah, the the mayor gives various orders. He's in the city hall, and he tells the task force, you're going to be going after all the vigilantes. We don't care about due process. We don't care about warrants. Clearly in violation of the uh, Fourth Amendment, which is the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures, shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. And clearly, I've signed countless warrants over the years, but there has to be a showing to you before you sign a warrant that there is good cause to sign this warrant. And he was telling this task force of his that it didn't matter, that we are going to, without warrants, do what we need to do to go against the vigilantes. This would also be in violation of the Sixth Amendment, which does give in all criminal proceedings, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. This is basically what guarantees you due process in a criminal case, and he doesn't care about that. He's having them thrown into jail without any due process. Clearly, something that can never happen in real life. And then in the Eighth Amendment requires bail that is not excessive. Here, people were being locked in little cages, and there was no bail being set. He then gives his marching orders to Buck. That Buck is to go to the hospital and take care of Matt. So much for him being gracious for Matt saving his life. He then goes to his chief of staff, Sheila, who says, I need to know who is out to get me and who is loyal on the staff. And then he has a scene with the Con Ed worker, and we really don't know at that moment why he is talking to a Con Ed worker about. And we soon learn that what it is to basically either shut off or short circuit the city's power, so that there would be a blackout, which would then give him the opportunity to declare martial law, which was his plan to create chaos, and in that chaos, basically become a dictator of New York City.
All not good.
All not good.
Like this is
And while that's, while he's doing all this, he has to take care of the one good government official that seems to be left, which is the police commissioner. And Sheila does show her loyalty to the kingpin by recording a conversation that the police commissioner is going to be going to Albany and to the governor and basically tell what is going on in the city of New York. Sheila clearly uh, plays this recording for the kingpin, who then is going to take care of Police Commissioner Gallo.
I'm all for separation of powers and a federalist state of federal government, state, local government. But the state of New York is not going to sit this one out. Like the governor should be on the phone going like, what is going on? Because there are state offices in New York City, I presume, just as there are state offices in, some of the capital cities here in California, whether it's Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, there are state offices. They have to take notice. Like there's
And the state of New York has a lot of power with dealing with the city and overruling things that the city does in fact do. I mean, even Kingpin declares martial law. That's not something that's legal in New York. In New York, under the military law, Section 9, it's only the governor who can declare martial law. And I was part of the state uh, legal militia for a number of years, and we drilled on martial law, and in some municipalities where there was a declaration of emergency by the locality, because the locality can declare an emergency, but it's only the state that can declare martial law. Once there's an emergency, the state might send troops to bring the peace, keep to help out, to rescues. And I did many missions in the state with hurricanes and with ice and with other things when the governor activated us after the municipality called those emergencies.
yeah, which you can. I am fine with the visually impaired lawyer that has a radar sense. I'm all on board with that. I'm not on board with the governor of New York sleeping through a blackout and taking no action, and that there's only one elected official in New York City, that was willing to go to the governor and say something, a foul is happening here. It's too big of a city for them to ignore. And it'd be one thing if it was some small town and where people don't recognize what's happening that quickly. That's more plausible for it to go. It's going to take a couple hours to figure out what happened here, opposed to it's New York City, so the feds would be involved. There's a huge federal footprint in New York City.
Including a very big FBI headquarters in New York City.
Yeah, yeah, they're not going to go like, golly gee, we're going to let the mayor handle this. Just no, just no. Which then let's talk about the Safer Street Initiative. We have the Deputy Mayor of Communications doing the shakedown like a mob boss on the city council, or at least members of the city council. To again, it looks a lot like organized crime of this is an awfully nice car you have here type situation.
Yeah,
And
we clearly learned that Deputy Mayor Daniel is Deputy Mayor of Shakedown.
yeah, yeah, it's communications is just an honorarium because he's communicating threats. Um, not good. Uh, we also have uh, someone get shot by a police officer that was looting. Looting bad. Individual should not have been doing that. Individual should have been stopped and prosecuted. All for that. Individual should not have had a summary execution and then a mask put over his face and saying it was just a vigilante, because now we've entered to planting evidence to cover up summary executions. And just that's the abandonment of law. That's the abandonment of the rule of law, and it's turned into rule of the gun and they're living in a fascist state at this point. And it's just messed up.
And it was very clear that the looter, when caught by the police, stopped. He didn't take any overt action against the police. So they were very clear in kind of showing that the police had absolutely no justification to kill this looter.
Yeah, it's just evil. Gabby?
Yeah, no, and it's really, we'll leave, again, excessive force and all of that obvious out of it, because obviously, as the judge said, that's very clear, right? But the other thing here is that they are guilty of tampering with evidence, right? They fabricate evidence by pulling the hoodie or the beanie over his head to make him look like he has a mask on, right? And so in under New York law, it's a Class E felony to tamper with physical evidence, including knowingly making, devising, or preparing false physical evidence. So these cops would be guilty of not only excessive force and murder and all of that sort of thing, but tampering with physical evidence as well. And I think just to circle back on the Deputy Mayor Daniel, he talks about asking gently, in quotes, asking them to leave. The mayor has really these are elected, it's, making the distinction between the employees, they're kind of asking to leave or stay home or whatever. These are elected officials. All the members of the New York City Council are duly elected officials. So there probably is some, leeway they have there, right, in extreme circumstances, but just saying, oh, you're dismissed is not necessarily, they are elected and not appointed positions. And so we'll talk about some other appointed positions in a bit, but these are elected officials.
Yeah, you don't get to do a shakedown on the opposition party. They too are elected. Which pivots us to Karen and, well, Matt Murdock goes home, escaping an assassination attempt, and the Punisher there is waiting for him in this blackout. And they have a home invasion of police officers that are now a kill squad to go out and kill Matt Murdock. And they enter Murdoch's home. So we're talking literal castle doctrine at this point in time of corrupt law enforcement. So one could argue that they are not acting in accordance with the law, even though they're wearing uniforms. And Murdoch and Castle defending themselves from being murdered. This is problematic on all kinds of levels because technically you're not supposed to resist law enforcement, but when it's a hit squad and looking like something out of a dictatorship, that it's in a new category that doesn't exist. There were comments about the American Civil War should have been settled in the courts, to which Lincoln, made the comment that there's no court that this exceeds any jurisdiction of a court. And they're kind of in that situation right now. There's no motion to file when people are coming into your home with rocket launchers and grenades. It's a new level, and uh, it flies in the face of what we expect in civil society, because none of that should be happening. You should not have kill squads sent by the mayor to eliminate you. So is self-defense justified? Yeah, because that stopped being law enforcement and transcended into a criminal enterprise. Would either of you like to share any other comments on that?
They like their Punisher shirts, so that again kind of showed the Punisher connection from this Kill Squad, and I was also very glad to see Karen return to the show because I like her character a lot, and I'm hopeful that she'll be around for the next season a lot more than she was this season.
The actress is also fun on social media, like loves the fans and
Yeah, she's a true fellow geek, which is nice to see.
Yeah, it's just like she's got cred from True Blood and everything else that she's been in. And it's, does signings for charity. And it's like, okay, cool. Like you're in this. Gabby, any other comments?
No, this was the highlight. The scene was the highlight of the episode for me. Although I think, and this goes back to what I commented before of, everybody in this episode is, or, show is very durable. Because we tend to forget that Matt escapes the hospital to obviously flee Buck killing him within hours of being shot through the upper chest, which granted, I imagine it didn't hit any critical arteries. That's why he like or organs, which is why he woke up so quickly. But he has a gaping, bleeding wound, and he takes a lot of hits and keeps moving. Um, so I guess the laws of wound care and general the things that would affect you or I in our reality here do not affect those in this show in the whatever reality universe the Daredevil show takes place in.
Having been under general anesthesia for surgery and then been on the resulting pain meds, I would not be in fighting condition at that point in time. And I appreciate, okay, they didn't hit the lung or heart. Cool, that's fantastic. Uh, but I'm like, he's gonna be stapled shut. Like, that's a lot
Yeah,
of flexing with.
and he walks from the hospital to his apartment, and then he does some more fight. I don't know. I don't think the laws of physics apply in this.
Taking out the IV would be hard. To do that without bleeding is a challenge. So yeah, he takes a beating and keeps on ticking. Just as Frank does as well. But that then pivots to let's go look at records and storage, which highlights the importance of records management. You do have to save records for a statutory amount of time. And the great Browning Marian, who was an e-discovery luminary, who wrote a book on records management, he tragically passed away, and he was a good friend. But when Browning wrote his book, there's like 14,000 records retention laws in the United States a decade ago. I don't think that number went down. So let's just say that minimum 7 years that they have to hold on to records. So
Mhm.
everything from that law firm with Murdoch or Nelson and Page is in storage for a specific amount of time. And luckily, it's not Iron Mountain, so it's easier to gain access to. Because normally that stuff is intentionally hard to get to because it's confidential in nature with attorney-client work product and communications. So, like, you have to protect it. They're able to get in. They do their thing, and they find this information about Red Hook. Gabby, this looks like your notes about what's a free port. And
Her notes on Freeport, but give me 2 seconds before we get to
yes, yes, go for it.
the Freeport. They find a motion that they cite the Red Hook Charter of 1855, which at least as far as my research does not exist. Maybe I'm wrong, but what it made me think of, which does exist, is during the Occupy Wall Street cases in New York, which I presided over some 2,500 of them. One of the defenses that was raised was dealing with the various trespasses. A lot of the property was owned by Trinity Church in New York. And the defense lawyers did find various treaties dealing with the King of England turning over the property to Trinity Church, and in an effort to show that Trinity Church wasn't technically the legal owner of many of the properties in New York, if I were to accept this particular defense that was raised. And when I heard this Red Hook Charter of 1855, that's the first thing I thought of, was all of the various things dealing with Trinity Church and them not being the rightful landlord because of these various old historical treaties. And I had initially was going to write on all of this into some ominous decision, and then I kind of was a little bit fearful as to where that might lead me as to ownership in New York City, and I decided just to rule from the bench and let the appellate courts deal with it if they needed to deal with it, and it never became an issue. But that's what this Red Hook Charter of 1855 reminded me of, and on that note, I'll turn it to Gabby to discuss free ports.
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting because, like you said, when we think of, and we mentioned this before, like New England, New York, the original 13 colonies, they they did exist before, kind of we had the, Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, all of these things that we, think of governing law here. There were much older documents, right, that governed society before the kind of modern laws we have today. But the way they describe this free port um, of Red Hook, where it would make all crimes legal and become its own city state, I don't know if that's necessarily the case because, similar to the Judge, all I could find in my research is the concept of a free port has more to do with taxes than it does with, say, any sort of laws, quote unquote, right? Or criminal laws. So it's a place designated. We see this in the UK. I believe there's some in Ireland as well, and various places throughout the world. And none in the US currently that we know of, are designated by the government as areas with little to no tax in order to encourage economic activity. They're located geographically within a country, but they essentially exist outside of its borders for tax purposes. I think that's the part that's left off in the Daredevil kind of concept of a free port. So, in essence, companies that are operating within these free ports can benefit from deferring the payment of taxes until their products are moved elsewhere, right? So, the idea of a free port is that it's somewhere where goods are held temporarily, right? They're not there permanently. So they're not taxed there, they're taxed somewhere else. So companies can either pay taxes when the goods are moved somewhere else. For example, if these are raw goods, right, they don't pay taxes until necessarily something is built or finished, a product is finished, or they could avoid them altogether if they bring in goods to store or manufacture on site before exporting. Again, that kind of raw materials argument. So again, you see this in the UK. There's several of them and other places throughout the world, but this is very much a tax thing, not necessarily applying like, to laws or stuff like that.
Yeah, and 1855 is after the founding of the United States. So that, like all this would require the United States carving out Red Hook to not be part of the United States. And that seems unlikely.
Yeah, I even went back to because when I first heard 1855, I thought I misheard it and that it was 1755 or something along those lines. And so I went back and, and no, they did say 1855.
Yeah, so timing doesn't work either
No.
because like it would have always been part of the United States. You would need an affirmative act to carve it out of the United States. I'm not aware of us doing that as a country, saying that this port is now no longer part of the United States for tax purposes. That seems very alien and against our nature as a country.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's kind of we talked about some of the gaps in structure of this episode, and it just seems like again, it's a simple thing to just call it 1755, or even 1655 would have probably been better because that would have put you square in kind of when the colonies were kind of setting up shop and all that kind of stuff, and put you well away from any kind of is there law, is there not law type of thing. But it's just odd that they chose 1855. It almost reads like a typo in a script that people went with, and then the production company was like, oh, now we have to make this document that says 1855, right? So it seems like a typo that just kind of grew legs, right? And somebody, I'm sure, is maybe some person that was working on the script and was like, oh, shoot, that was supposed to say 1655. My bad. So if that person ends up listening to this podcast, I'm sorry that we're calling out your typo.
Yeah, yeah. Was this some writers getting together and go like, wouldn't it be cool if the United States had a part that wasn't the United States where murder could be legal and there's no taxes? It's like, what libertarian fever dream are you living in of just no, like no, we don't do that. Like, you're not going to have a port in the United States that's going to be controlled by the United States Coast Guard, because if this is like free reign, free enterprise, we do whatever we want, now it's a soft target for terrorists and nuclear weapons and other things that can do harm to the country. That makes no sense analytically. That's just not something that we would tolerate. I'm pretty sure if it did happen, we would fix that very quickly with an act of Congress to go, yeah, we've just annexed this. And here's your just compensation. Bye-bye. Uh,
Yeah.
it just,
It's a
anyway,
fascinating concept, though. Like, it's a fascinating narratively, the idea that this place exists where Kingpin can kind of operate without rules, but it's within the geographical bounds of New York City. And again, if they had specifically kept it to tax purposes, which seems to be kind of, there could be a nefarious element there, right? We talk about tax evasion and all these sorts of things, right? The idea that art dealers like Vanessa and others would use these things to their advantage to park uh, art there, which essentially seemed to be what she was doing, parking art there and then moving it and not having to pay taxes. That does get her a windfall, but it keeps it more within the bounds of something that actually kind of legally exists.
it's like Martha's Vineyard declaring independence. Like, it's just, it doesn't make sense of, what we're now in charge of ourselves. Just, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, I will say Key West has tried to declare independence before. They have tried to annex themselves. So, islands of the United States or coastal areas declaring annexation is not completely um, without history.
Yeah, but at least that would be more plausible as opposed to a chunk of New York City being a city state that where commerce can just flow in and out without regulation. So no, because the property deal to buy things is still controlled by the state. Like, who, if, so nobody owns this, like none of the land deals matter now because they're not subject to the laws of the United States. Okay. Again, it's legally nonsensical. They needed a way to have a place where Red Hook or whatever could be for Kingpin to operate with impunity, and this is what they came up with, and it's just legally weird. Like, it doesn't make sense. But there are things that continue to not make sense. Um, Again, we've talked about Punisher verse all of the corrupt task force. We've talked about Sheila ratting out the commissioner. Uh, I don't think we need to stray too far to say what happens to the police commissioner is murder. Um,
But
and
it did bring back Kingpin's favorite mechanism of murder in the comic book, so that really hadn't been seen in this TV show.
crushing the
Uh,
skull.
crushing the skull with his bare hands. So that the Kingpin method was quite sick,
Yeah,
to say the least.
and what annoyed me, trying to play this everyman card in order to turn the police officers against their commissioner. The person that they've known probably their entire career or known of their entire career is suddenly he's not for you. but I was in prison for murdering lots of people, and I'm on your side. I don't think law enforcement would bend to the kingpin's will like that. I think that
And you saw their faces when he crushed his skull. I mean, it was not like those were not happy looks from the officers. They were scared looks from the officers.
yeah, it sends a message of I'm on the wrong team. I'm leaving now. Bye bye. Few people highlight that of yay, let's do more of this. Uh, so we have the next morning, Kingpin does a news conference. He appoints Heather to be the commissioner of mental health. She agrees.
Again, another showing of why you don't mention the girlfriend's name at the hospital when your other girlfriend's there.
Yeah, just. I mean, I understand he was medicated, but you gotta just no. Just no, no, no. Uh, yeah. We have the Safer Streets Initiative, which looks like was enacted overnight. So again, it's that Tonkin Gulf, 99 to 1 or 99 to 2 type passage of, did anyone read this? It's like the declaration of war against Japan on December 8th was 99 to 1. Like Jeanette Rankin, excuse me, yeah, we weren't at 100 yet. We didn't have 50 states, but it was everybody but Jeanette Rankin voted for the declaration of war because she was an avowed pacifist and promptly thrown out of office at the next election because that doesn't, there wasn't a good option. Uh, those who were not on board with the Tonkin Gulf resolution are remembered with more favor. Those who were voices against the Patriot Act or the authorization to use force after 9/11, there's kinder historical views of them now for a variety of reasons. But this is passed in the middle of the night because of a blackout, so it's a fraudulent reason. There's duress involved in why they get voted on, so all bad. But it says any vigilante illegal activity is illegal, which is kind of the point of vigilantism. It's already illegal. It's now more illegal. It's like speeding through you're not supposed to speed through a neighborhood, but it's more illegal if you speed by a school. It's that kind of logic. It's now more illegal. And apparently there are shoot to kill orders. We have a reference here to military law with the governor to declare martial law. Your Honor, was that anything to add upon that?
No, it's just that it's a power of the governor and not of the mayor. The mayor can declare a state of emergency for the city, but the only one who can declare martial law for the geographical for New York State or any part thereof is the governor of New York.
Gabby, you have some notes about under Executive Law 24. Would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so going off of that, the mayor does have, as we mentioned before, the power to declare an emergency. And part of that is that, kind of teasing out what Fisk does, what is legal, what is not. Part of what is, he can't obviously declare martial law, as we've talked about, but he can set a curfew, right? And he can put certain restrictions in place if he declares a state of emergency, to kind of all within public safety, right? There are certain restrictions on this, including the duration of time. This does not exist kind of in perpetuity, these powers. But he can establish a curfew, prohibit people from moving around at certain times, right? Designation of specific zones, within which the occupancy and use of the building may be prohibited and regulated. Regulated of closing of places of amusement and assembly, suspension and limitation of sale of alcoholic beverages, explosive, firearms, flammable materials, and liquids, prohibition and control of the presence of persons on public streets and places, designation of emergency shelter, which is what we usually see when a official declares an emergency, but I don't think Fisk is opening any emergency shelters for anybody. And the suspension of particular laws, which I guess you could maybe argue that's what he's trying to do here with martial law, is really leaning into that suspension of laws. But you can't do that. And Josh, as you said, people would notice if he tried to do this. He had a press conference about it too, so people would notice.
Yeah, like the governor, the Senate, U.S. senators, the state legislature, they would go, "What? No, like you don't get to do this." Uh-uh. Uh, no. Which then pivots back to the hero with them realizing that they're going to go raise an army, and naturally following, the like tradition of the Green Dragon, our heroes gather in a bar, and that's where, we have some law enforcement and others deciding to plan their next step against the mayor, who is no longer acting as a public servant. We do find out that in Red Hook we have people in little cages, which includes Jack, who, after our last episode and wondering about the swordsman, thinking that that was originally like Hawkeye's identity, way back into Avengers, that was either 16 or 19. It's like, remember reading it as a kid. Jack is the swordsman who's always been a foil to Hawkeye and Clint Barton. So the fact that the Hawkeye TV series had Jack as Kate Bishop's mother's love interest was a nice deep cut twist that I didn't pick up on until doing a little research. Because kudos to them for making that kind of a deep cut comic connection. That was very subtle, very well done. And back to just the early double digits of the Avengers comics. So that was very cool. But it should go without saying, you can't just put people in cages and throw away the key. Especially it looks like dog cages, like we're talking golden retriever. It's like people can't, you're not supposed to do that. Just no. Um, and we then pivot to season 2 after a mid-credit scene that makes more sense for Frank Castle breaking the arm off a dude in order to presumably escape. I would hope Frank takes people with him because you have all these people with checkbooks who are now going to be very motivated. Not that I'm encouraging that behavior. I am not, but from a comic book perspective, that makes sense. You don't leave people behind. All right. Either of you have any other comments or thoughts on this?
Like the slogan of the new rebel group, the resist, rebel and rebuild. We are a city without fear. We'll make a nice T-shirt, I'm sure, and soon to be for sale by Disney. But yeah, like we said, it's it's clearly a setup for the next season. So this, while like you, I don't care about a cliffhanger. There was just several missteps in this episode that unfortunately, after a really good season, it's. I wish they had hit a home run as opposed to a double.
Yeah, and I still think it's stronger than the first season on Netflix because the first season had a bunch of filler episodes.
Yes.
This had no filler episodes. It was just the finale that leads to season 2 had some say what moments to it that again that was a writer's room that needed a little more work, but overall I think this was stronger than season 1, and I will defend that if I need to. So, and Gabby, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, it started strong. Like I said, I loved the fight with Frank and Matt in the apartment. But where it gets to at the end, again, I'm like you guys, open to a cliffhanger. But I think there just would have been a stronger finish had it been not this like all out war zone that it seems to be. I think what I really liked was leaning into the kind of political machinations of it all, right? And I think it would have been a much stronger arc had you maybe not done, you still had him turn into like Mayor Kingpin, right? But I think having that, you know, having him still navigate the political landscape, having Matt as DA, right? Having this more nuanced, right? Because I think for me, where it ended up, whereas it's this like fighting, fist and fist, like with kind of more violence than kind of intellect and political strategy and all that, which I think was the strong point of the season. And so I'm interested to see how they kind of, set it up because again, like there's a lot of people in New York that are affected by this. And it's not just going to be like, like where do you take this army, right? Do you immediately depose Fisk? Do you, like why are people not coming to New York City like to deal with this, So for me, that was the kind of letdown. I think there was probably deeper, more richer storytelling they could have done. And this just seems to be like oh, let's have them just be, enemies and, fight against each other type of thing.
Yeah, because it could have been more interesting with a giant plot twist of he saved me. Now what? And Fisk actually growing into the role of mayor and trying to be the mayor. Like there's nuance to that. There's character growth to that, as opposed to being John the Bastard of I'm a villain for being of the villain's sake, and everything with the Kingpin is aggressive urban renewal, so he can make money, so it's a nice place for him to live. Just a missed opportunity to do more after having so many excellent, thoughtful points from a guy who steals fiddle faddle getting the book thrown at him to those who are doing truly ugly crimes getting out so they can commit more ugly crimes. So there's uh yeah, I don't know if they just boxed themselves in and they didn't know how to get to season two, or what did they get notes? I mean, there are all these weird questions. I'll be here for it. I'll absolutely be here for it. But they wrote a bigger story that should involve other characters.
And that bigger story is in the comic book arc that kind of is the story. I mean, it's so, you don't necessarily want to go word for the comic book arc because you do want to create some surprise. Granted, the market for those that are reading the comic books as opposed to watching the TV are vastly different, and most people wouldn't know that this was taken from that comic book story. But that series, that the arc where he remains the mayor, his wife kind of runs the criminal enterprise, and Matt becomes the DA, and this could still be the way it
Or, yeah.
goes, but it was a very, very good, thoughtful arc as opposed to let's just have a good guys against bad guys war.
Yeah, it's again, there are other ways forward that would have been because it was on this really neat setup, and then episode 9 does a left turn that it's like, okay, that's so there's no character growth. Got it.
Mm. Yeah, and I think for me too, even the one main cop of the task force, right? I kept seeing that he was going to potentially turn on this operation, right? Because they do paint him initially as this bad guy, right? That's roughing up guys. But then he does say that, his brother wears this badge, his dad wears this badge, and there's a dedication to what the badge stands for, and even when he's holding up the mask of a Muse, it seems like he's not fully into this lie that's being sold. But then he's like, no, I'm just gonna like stand here for all of this kind of silliness. So, and this violence and all of this kind of thing. So again, yeah, it's a missed opportunity for deeper character development, I think, all the way around.
And make people think, because it's a sad fact that a lot of the stories that we get in pop culture are just fast cars, bright lights, explosions, and punch the bad guy, as opposed to something with nuance that gets people to think of, oh, wait a minute, like what is, you know, how is there no growth? How is there no thought? Like, people realize, is this a good idea? Do I want to be on this path? So, um,
There's
or
some missed opportunities is what it
yeah,
comes down to.
yeah, missed opportunity. Overall, I give it a A minus, for this season. So again, I looked forward to it each week. Um, Enjoyed getting to talk about it each week. Grateful to have it. So it's not like you watch and it's like, we're dumber for this. Like that has happened of this has hurt all of us and there will be ramifications. Uh, like how,
And they had some great legal issues, some great courtroom scenes, some great, real legal evidentiary issues. So clearly, as lawyers, this is a real fun show to watch. And I understand that not everyone watching the show is a lawyer, so we have to not necessarily just deal only with legal issues. Um, but there were a lot of missed opportunities to develop the characters a little bit more fully and to discuss ideas that matter today, which is really what sci-fi and is about. It's about, and Marvel has always been this. If you look from their early 60s comic books, it's always been a social commentary on what's going on now. And there were some missed opportunities to just turn it into a us versus them, vigilante versus non-vigilante, dirty cops against the heroes. So there's just some missed opportunities.
yeah, it's grateful to have it, and thankful for the cast and crew who, like the behind the scenes photos of like the black tie party looks like they had a rocking good time with singing. And it was like, you want to hang out with those guys because it looks like they had so much fun with, like Vincent with the band. It's like, dude, cool. Like more of that. And or is there video? Because people would probably enjoy him singing. And so more of that, please.
Yeah, and excellent acting.
Hmm.
There was we're not making any bad commentary as to the
No,
parts. This is D'Onofrio played an amazing role. Everyone really played their character well. The characters could have been developed a little bit more nuanced in that last episode.
yeah. Yeah, and the fact that it's just at the end, we're like, this could use just a hint more cooking, says a lot about the quality of the show. So with that, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We're going to have a recap of Star Wars Celebration. We're going to start talking about Andor Season 2 very shortly. And we're going to have a busy summer. There are lots of cool things coming up, and stay tuned for more. So everyone, wherever you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky. Take care.